So if you were with us for the last deep dive, we spent a lot of time really dissecting the architecture of marriage.
We did.
We looked at the couple, the friction points, and those massive communication gaps between the male and female brain.
Right.
We basically tried to figure out how two, different biological operating systems can even manage to coexist under one roof.
Without killing each other, which, let's be honest, is a challenge even when things are going perfectly.
Absolutely. But Today, we're raising the stakes. We are taking that couple and we are dropping a hand grenade into the living room. A very cute, crying, sleep-depriving hand grenade.
The child.
We're moving from the wedding chapel to the nursery. And the core question we're tackling in this deep dive is, well, it's actually quite controversial in the current cultural moment.
It is. The question is simple, but it's loaded. Are mothers and fathers interchangeable?
Because the narrative right now is a resounding yes. We tend to think that, okay, apart from the obvious plumbing differences, a parent is a parent.
Right. The skills are the same, the instincts are the same.
It's just a matter of who decides to grab the diaper bag or heat up the bottle, right?
That is the prevailing social view, that parenting is a unisex job and, any differences are just the result of how we were raised.
But the source material we're breaking down today argues that this is just biologically false.
It suggests we're looking at two completely different roles. One, fatherhood is largely a socially learned behavior. It's a choice. But motherhood, the research suggests that is a biological imperative, hardwired by a hormonal takeover that is, frankly, staggering in its scale.
So we aren't just talking about different parenting styles. We're talking about fundamentally different biological software.
We are. The thesis here is that parenting is not a single unisex activity. And if you try to run the mother's software on the father's hardware, or vice versa,
you get glitches.
You get glitches. You get conflict.
We have a massive amount to unpack here. We're going to look at the chemical conspiracy of pregnancy, why new mothers develop what look like, sensory superpowers, and the very different modes of doing versus being with a baby.
And we'll look at a massive historical experiment,
Yeah.
the Kibbutz Movement, that tried to erase these gender roles and, well, failed.
It's a roadmap of biological divergence. So let's start at the beginning. Biology 101.
Okay.
I think for a lot of men, and maybe even for society at large, we view pregnancy as something that happens to the woman. She gets bigger, she gets tired.
These pickles at 2 a.m.
Right. But the sources describe it less like a physical change and more like a chemical invasion.
It is a hostile takeover of the body's chemistry.
Yeah.
You have to look specifically at progesterone. We've touched on this before. Progesterone is kind of the sedative hormone in the female cycle. It keeps things calm.
Right. It's nature's chill pill.
But during pregnancy, the levels of progesterone, they don't just inch up. They explode. They rise 100-fold.
Wait, 100 times the normal baseline?
Yes. The placenta effectively becomes a progesterone factory. The source calls it nature's Valium.
So the woman is being kept in a chemically induced state of massive sedation.
For 9 months. This isn't just to keep her relaxed. It's a sustained dose to alter her metabolic rate, her focus, and prepare her for the nesting phase. She is literally high on pregnancy hormones.
So her reality is just fundamentally altered. She's operating through a chemical fog that keeps her turned inward.
Right.
But then comes the delivery. And this is the part that I think is often misunderstood as just stress or, new mom jitters.
The crash. It's so crucial to understand the mechanics here because it explains so much of the early friction. When the baby is born, the placenta is delivered.
Which means the progesterone factory is gone.
Ejected from the body, so the supply line is cut. Instantly.
Off a cliff.
Imagine being on a massive daily dose of Valium for nearly a year and then going cold turkey in the span of an afternoon.
That sounds violent. That's physical withdrawal.
It is. The source notes that 84% of mothers experience the baby blues or some form of postpartum depression.
84%. That's basically the standard experience. It's not an anomaly.
It is the standard. And we tend to psychologize this, she's anxious about being a good mom or she's overwhelmed. But the argument here is that it's physiological shock. Her brain is chemically exposed.
And this is where the divergence begins, because you have to contrast that with the father standing in the delivery room.
Yeah.
He's tired, sure, maybe a little shell-shocked.
But his hormonal baseline is effectively unchanged. He hasn't been sedated for 9 months. He isn't going through withdrawal. To him, this baby is, as the source puts it, an exciting new project.
A project. And that sounds almost detached.
It's external. He's looking at the situation from the outside. Meanwhile, the mother is undergoing a violent internal readjustment. So right from minute one, they're experiencing the arrival of the child in two completely different realities.
One is observing a new addition. The other is surviving a biological storm. And the sources go deeper than just the temporary hormones. They argue that the hardware itself is different. They use this computer analogy of like pre-installed software versus learned applications.
This is the whole maternal instinct debate. The argument is that the female brain is pre-wired for maternal behavior in a way the male brain simply isn't.
They cite some animal studies to back this up. And I know we always come back to rats in these deep dives.
The rats.
But this experiment is particularly wild.
It's the blood experiment. It's a classic because it isolates the chemistry so perfectly.
Right.
So you take a virgin female rat one that has never had pups.
Okay.
If you put babies near her, she's indifferent. She might even attack them. She has absolutely no interest in nurturing.
She's not a mom, so she doesn't care.
Correct. But if you take the blood of a new mother rat blood that is saturated with those maternal hormones and you inject it into the virgin female.
What happens? Does she just get high?
She immediately adopts maternal behavior. She starts building nests. She retrieves pups that aren't even hers.
So it's like a chemical key unlocked a dormant program in her brain.
The software was there. It just needed the password.
Yeah.
Precisely. But here is the kicker. And this is what really separates the sexes.
Okay.
If you do the exact same thing to a male rat, inject him with the blood of a new mother, nothing happens.
Zero reaction.
Zero. He remains indifferent. He might still be aggressive. His brain lacks the receptors. He doesn't have the hardware to run that software, even if you flood him with a chemical signal.
Wow. So that implies that for men, parenting isn't a biological switch you can just flip.
The source argues that for men, parenting is a learned behavior. You can train a male rat to care for pups, but it takes time, repetition, conditioning.
It's a skill he acquires.
For the female, it's ignited.
And we see this in humans, right?
Yeah.
Specifically with sensory gating. This explains the classic 3 a.m. argument where the baby is crying.
And the dad is sawing logs.
And the mom is furious because she thinks he's faking it.
He's usually not faking it. The source talks about the physiological reaction to an infant's cry. In women, that sound triggers a measurable spike in oxytocin. It can cause milk letdown or even nipple erection. Her body physically responds to the distress signal as a high priority alert.
She is tuned to that frequency. It's like a dog whistle she can't ignore.
Her brain categorizes that sound above almost everything else. But for the father, unless he has consciously trained himself to listen for it, his brain just filters it out.
The source mentions a mother can hear a baby turn over in the crib through a closed door, but the father can sleep through a passing siren.
It's a difference in auditory priorities. She's on sentinel duty, he's on standby.
And that creates massive friction. She interprets his sleep as apathy. He doesn't care about the baby.
And he interprets her wakefulness as neurosis. Why are you so anxious? The baby is fine. But really, they just have different filter settings.
This leads us to the actual parenting style. You know, once everyone is awake, the way moms and dads interact with the baby is distinct. The source uses a really interesting framework here. Doing versus being.
This is fundamental.
Yeah.
Because fatherhood isn't biologically driven by that same hormonal flood. It manifests differently. The male style is doing.
This is the fun dad archetype.
The magic man. When a father interacts with an infant or toddler, he tends to treat the child almost like an object, bundle in acrobatic maneuvers.
I see this at the park constantly. Dads throwing kids in the air, holding them upside down, roughhousing. It looks like total chaos to the moms watching.
It's controlled chaos. He is the treat, the star. His focus is on stimulation, excitement, and risk. He's preparing the child for the outside world. He's teaching them about limits, gravity, resilience.
And the mother?
The mother's mode is being. Her interaction is typically verbal, face-to-face, and centered on soothing. She's the home base.
The security anchor.
Right. The source points out a pattern you can observe anywhere. When a baby is bored, who does it look for?
The dad. They want the show. They want to be thrown in the air.
Exactly. But when a baby is frightened or hurt or sick, who do they run to?
The mother.
Almost always. The mother provides internal security. The father provides external stimulus.
But this creates a really unfair comparison in the household, doesn't it? I mean, I can totally see why mothers get resentful.
Oh, absolutely.
She's doing the feeding, the cleaning, the comforting, the 2-4 of grind, and then dad walks in, throws the kid in the air for 5 minutes, gets a laugh, and feels like the hero.
It's a major source of resentment. The source notes that mothers often feel the father is the leave-me-alone parent until he decides it's playtime. She feels like the drudge, and he gets to be the magic man.
But the source argues this isn't because he's lazy or trying to dodge the hard work.
No, they argue it's a reflection of his biological orientation. He relates to the child through action, through doing. She relates to nurturing, through being.
Now, if we were having this conversation at a dinner party, someone would inevitably say, hey, this is just socialization. We teach boys to be rough and girls to be gentle. If we just tweak the culture enough, these differences will vanish. But the source brings up a historical example where they tried to do exactly that on a massive scale.
The Kibbutz experiments in Israel.
And this wasn't just some small academic study. This was a multi-generational social engineering project.
It was huge. The goal of the Kibbutz Movement, specifically regarding gender, was to totally erase traditional roles. They wanted to liberate women from the drudgery of domestic work so they could work alongside the men in the fields and factories.
So they figured if you removed the structure of the housewife, you'd remove the gender difference.
Exactly. And the way they handled the kids was radical communal rearing.
So what'd that look like?
Children lived in children's houses.
Yeah.
They were cared for by professional nurses and educators. They didn't even sleep in their parents' homes. The idea was to break that intense, exclusive bond so that the community became the family.
A blank slate approach. Treat boys and girls the same. Remove the mother burden completely.
And for a while, they enforced this. But the source highlights what happened over 3 or 4 generations. It wasn't the men who demanded a return to tradition.
What gives the women?
The mothers rebelled. Slowly, gradually, the women in the kibbutz began demanding the return of their children. They wanted to put them to bed. They wanted to dress them. They wanted that private time.
They wanted the drudgery back.
They wanted the connection. The source argues that this proves maternal instinct is a biogrammar. You can try to edit it out with ideology. You can set up structures to prevent it. But eventually, the biology just reasserts itself.
There was that striking quote from the source. Women are returning to maternal roles against the wishes of the men of their communities.
The men were happy with the arrangement. Of course. They could work, see the kids for fun time, and sleep through the night. But the women's biological drive for that specific type of closeness, the being, it just overpowered the social engineering.
That is a powerful argument for nature over nurture. It suggests there's a bedrock we can't just wish away.
It suggests biology doesn't stop at the neck. We are not blank slates.
So if we accept that these differences are real, that mom is the security anchor and dad is the stimulus machine, what happens to the marriage when that first baby actually arrives?
The crisis of the first child.
The source mentions a statistic that it just makes you wince.
4 out of 5 marriages go through a severe crisis after the birth of the first child.
That is nearly everyone. Why is the failure rate so high right at the moment that should be the happiest?
Well, it stems from this collision of biological imperatives. You have to look at the male perspective first, which is often termed displacement.
He feels replaced.
Think about it. Up until the baby, the woman's emotional focus, her nurturing energy, was largely directed at him. He was the primary recipient of that female gaze. He was the priority.
And now there's a new sheriff in town?
A very demanding sheriff.
Yeah.
And suddenly, her biology forces her to focus entirely on the infant. It's not a choice. It's that hormonal takeover we talked about. The husband looks at this, and consciously or not, he views the baby as a competitor.
He's jealous of his own kid.
He feels displaced. He's used to being the center of her emotional world, and now he's on the periphery.
And how does the woman see it? Does she realize she's shutting him out?
Not really. To her, affection isn't a finite commodity. She doesn't feel like she's taking love away from him to give to the baby. She views the child as an extension of their love. She assumes he feels the exact same intense bond she does.
But he doesn't because he didn't get the hormone shot.
Exactly. He's standing there with his normal brain, looking at her, totally consumed by this creature, and he feels shut out. And she looks at him and thinks, why aren't you as obsessed as I am? Why are you being so selfish? Why do you need attention right now?
And that misunderstanding it festers.
That is the crisis. She's responding to an imperative he simply cannot feel, and he's reacting to a loss she doesn't realize she's inflicting.
But the source, and I think this is crucial, doesn't end on, well, men are from Mars, women are from Venus, good luck with the divorce.
No, thankfully.
It actually argues that this difference is the whole point.
Yes. This is the concept of complementarity. The tragedy is that we interpret difference as worse. We think If dad isn't mothering like mom, he's doing it wrong. Or if mom isn't playing like dad, she's boring.
But the child needs both energies.
The child desperately needs both.
Huh.
The source argues the child needs the mother's security to feel safe enough to exist and the father's stimulus to learn how to leave that safety and explore the world.
So if you only had security, you'd never leave the house. You'd be safe, but you'd be stunted.
And if you only had stimulus, you'd probably jump off a cliff before you were 5.
Precisely. The tension between the two, the come here, let me hold you, and the go on, climb that tree, is what creates a balanced human being.
It's a team sport, but the players have different positions.
And different equipment.
Right. And the problem arises when we value one style over the other. In our modern world, we often value the male style independence, action, doing.
And so mothers often feel their role of being and comforting is somehow inferior.
Or conversely, we try to force fathers to be second mothers. We hand them the baby and say, hold it like this, soothe it like this, and then get mad when they just want to wrestle or tease.
Right. We try to legislate sameness in the living room, and it leads to frustration because it ignores the assets each parent brings to the table. We're asking a trumpet to sound like a violin.
Well said.
So, to bring this deep dive home, mothers and fathers are not interchangeable parts. We are running different operating systems.
One provides the biological anchor, the hormone-fueled security. The other provides the bridge to the outside world.
And trying to pretend these differences don't exist, like in the kibbutz, doesn't liberate us. It just creates a different kind of conflict.
Nature has a plan for the survival of the species that relies on these differences. That is the provocative thought from the source. If we try to pretend that biology stops at the neck, we might actually be missing the manual on how to raise a resilient child.
It really makes you rethink the definition of equality. Does equality mean we have to be clones? Or can we be equal but distinct?
That is the question we all have to answer in our own homes.
And speaking of distinct, we've covered the home, we've covered the nursery, but these biological brains don't stay at home forever. Eventually, the doing brain and the being brain put on suits and head to the office.
And if you think the friction is high in the nursery, wait until you see what happens in the boardroom.
That is next. We are taking this deep dive into the 9 to 5 next time. The workplace gap. You won't want to miss it. Thanks for listening.